In this video, we will see how we can have multiple activities in our Android application. Let's start by creating a new Android Studio project. We'll select our first activity or our main activity to be an empty activity. We'll call this, let's call this application activities. And I'll leave them these settings as they are, language Java, and the minimum API is 15, and I'll click finish. So now we have our activity. We have the two files, the activity underscore main.xml and the main activity.java. And to check what activities you actually have in your application, you can go to the manifest folder, and then you have Android manifest.xml, and that will show you, as we said before, information about your application. So the icon that you are using, which is at this folder, mipmap, which is in the resources folder in here, and this is the name of that icon, IC_launcher, and then the label of that application. This is the name that will be appearing in that in the application menu. This is the round icon. So if your phone is displaying the icons as round images, this is the icon that will be displayed. And then you will have, if you have a theme, this is the theme. And lastly, we have the activities. So we'll see that the activity starts with the activity tag, the name of the activity in here, and then at the end we are closing the activity with the closing tag. Inside here we have an intent filter, and because we only have one activity, this is the first activity we'll be launching, and this is the activity that will be starting. So you'll see we have two lines in here. One is the action main, and one is the category launcher. Now, when you have these two together, this means that this is the activity that will be launched when we click on the icon for that application in our application menu. So far we only have one activity in this application, and that's why we have this in here. So I'm just going to do some modification here to my activity. In this text view, I'm just going to change the text and make it as activity 1, so we know that we are in activity 1 when we launch this activity. So this is activity 1. If we run this application in the emulator, we'll see that the screen will be displaying activity 1. So now let's go and create another activity in our application. To do that, I can right click in here. In the new menu, I will select activity, and I can select one of these types, the pre-filled types, and I will just go ahead and select an empty activity. We'll get this create new activity or new Android activity window, and I'll just leave it as main2 activity. If you check this, that will generate also the layout file. It's not only going to create a Java file, it will also create the layout file, which is activity_main2. And if you check that this is the launcher activity, that means this is the activity that will be launched when you click on the application icon in the menu or the application menu on your phone. We'll leave it without checking this. We want to keep activity 1 as our main activity, as our launcher activity. So we'll leave this unchecked. We'll keep it in the same package. It will still be in Java, and we'll leave the source as main. So we'll click finish, and that will create a new activity for us called main2 activity. So now I have these two new files, main2 activity and activity_main2.xml. Notice that the XML files are next to each other, and the Java files are next to each other. So now that we created this new activity, if we go check the Android manifest file.xml, Android manifest.xml, you'll see we have another activity here called main2 activity. Notice in here we do not have anything between the opening tag and the closing tag for that activity. The other activity, the main activity, it had this intent filter, which, as we said, means that this is the main activity, this is the starting point, and this is the activity that will be launched when we have, or when we click on the icon from our application menu. So this is the launcher activity. So if we rerun our application again, we'll see that nothing is actually changing. We will still be displaying the activity 1 on our screen because we did not change anything in that manifest file. So let's go to this activity main2.xml. It's empty for now. Let's add a text view and let's center it. So I'll add a constraint to the top, constraint to the bottom, right and left, so we can center it to the middle of the screen. And I'm gonna change the text to display activity 2, so we know that we are in activity 2. Now that we have this, I'm going to go to the Android manifest file and I'm gonna move this intent filter, these 4 lines, I'm gonna put them in activity 2 now. So I'll put them in here. So now we are saying that this main2 activity is the main activity that will be launched when we start the application. So if we restart the application now, instead of displaying the activity 1, we'll be displaying activity 2. So let's rerun this application. And you'll see we are actually displaying now activity 2. So let's go back and actually redo what we did, or undo what we did. So I'm gonna leave my main activity as the launcher activity, and I'll leave main2 activity without that intent filter. So how can we navigate between these two different activities? Let's add a button in main activity. In here, let's add a button, and I'm just gonna put it at the bottom of the screen, so I'll center it to the bottom here. And let's add an onClick method. So when we click on that, button, I want to go to the other activity. So let's make this, or add the onClick. So onClick, and let's say that when we click on this method, or when we click on this button, we'll go to a method called switch activity. So this is a method. We have the red underline because we do not have this method in our Java class. So let's go to main activity in here and create that. Let's create that method. So public void switch activity. And this method will take a view, and let's call that view. We need to import it, so Alt Enter to import that view class. And what we are going to do in this method, so when we click on that button in this activity, when we click on this button, we should be switching to activity 2. So how do you do that? Let's go back here. What we need to do is we need to create something called an intent. The intent will be the one that will switch between these two activities. So to create an intent, we will need to use the intent class. Let's call it intent. And this will be equal to a new intent. And this intent will be taking this, comma, and then the class name of the second activity. So this is our context, and the class name of the second activity will be main2 activity dot class. So this is our intent. We are creating an intent of that other class. So we have the same package context, and the class is main2 activity dot class. So now that we have this intent object that references this other class, we can start this intent by calling a method available in the parent class app compact activity, which is called start activity. So start activity will take an intent, and the intent that we are going to pass is the intent that we created, which is actually pointing to main2 activity dot class. So again, we started by creating an object of the class intent. This object is taking the context, which is in this case the keyword this, the current context, and the class that will be pointing to using that intent, which is main2 activity dot class. To start that activity, we will use the method start activity, and then we are calling the intent, or we are passing the intent with that method. So if we rerun this application again, we are starting with activity 1. We have this button. When we click on it, we'll be going to activity 2. Now, usually when we navigate between two activities, we want to send information from the first activity to the second activity. So to be able to send that information, we want to attach that information or these information to the intent that we created. To add messages or information to that intent, we can use the intent object, and then we can call a method called putExtra. PutExtra takes two parameters. The first parameter is a string that represents the name of the value that you are going to send, and the second parameter is the value that you are going to send. So the first parameter is the name of that value. So if you are sending the username or you are sending the password, that's the name that you are going to assign to that value. So you can think of it as the variable name. And the second parameter will be the actual value. The actual value could be of any data type. It could be a Boolean, byte, short, a string, or whatever you want. So let's say that we want to pass the user. So this is the name of the value. And the value that we are going to pass is my name. So we are attaching or putting this extra information into our intent. So when we start the activity, we'll be able to retrieve that information from our intent. So in this second activity, what we need to do is actually get that intent that was sent to us. So we can create a new intent here, a new intent object. Let's also call it intent. And this will not be a new intent, it will just be get intent. So we are retrieving the intent that was sent to us from the first activity. So this intent, we are not creating a new intent, we are just receiving the intent that was sent to us by the first activity. Now we can get all the information that is in that intent. So for example, we can create a string, call it user, and this string will be equal to the intent. And from that intent, instead of putting extra, we are getting the string extra, so the string that we placed there. And what is the name of that string extra? We called it user. So we are checking the intent, we are getting we are getting a string extra from that intent, and this string extra name is called user. So whatever value we have stored in the string extra user will be stored in this string user. So let's change the text view. So let's actually create the text view here. So text view, the text view we have there. So text view TV. And then let's find that view from our ID, from our XML file, TV equals find view by ID, and r.id, and then dot the name of that text view, which was text view. So now we have the TV, and let's set the TV set text to the string user that we got from that intent. So if we rerun this application again, if we click on button, now we are displaying, instead of activity 2, we are displaying Shukri, which was sent to us from the first activity. So let's go back to activity main, and instead of passing these values as hard-coded values, let's add some edit text here. So I will add plain text in here, and I'll center it between here and here, and I'll center it in the middle. And I'll remove the text and put a hint. And let's say, please enter name. And then I'll actually add another text view or edit text that will take a number. And I'll place it directly below this one and center it to the middle. And let's say, give it a hint, please enter age. So now we have this in activity 1, we have two edit texts, one that asks you to enter the age or the name, and one that asks you to enter the age. Let's go map these in our Java. So activity main or main activity.java, I'll have edit text. Let's call this one name, and edit text, and let's call this one age. So the name, this is the edit text. Let's go to the onCreate method and initialize them. So name equals find view by ID, r.id.edit text, and the second one is age equals find view by ID r.id.textView2. So now instead of passing the value Shukri in here directly, I will be passing the value from, or this one should be edttext2 actually. I'll be passing the value that we got from the first edttext, which is name.getText. So the string that we get from the edttext name, we'll be passing it as an extra string. We can also get the age. We can put another extra in here, so intent.putExtra. And then we can call this one age. So this is our key, or this is the name of the value. And then the name or the value that we are passing, we will be getting age.getText. So we are putting two extra information in this intent. One is the user and one is the age, and we are passing it with the intent. So if you go back to main2.activity, instead of only setting the text to the user, let's actually get another string, which is age. And that's intent.getStringExtra. And we are getting now the age. I'm treating the age for now, I'm treating it as a string, so we do not have any problems with that. And then for the TV, I'm gonna set the name, user, or let's say welcome. Let's put this as a string, so in quotations, welcome, concatenate it with the username. So welcome user. And then let's concatenate it with age and then age. So let's rerun this application again. So now we have this activity 1. It is asking me for a name. So I'm gonna type my name, and then it will ask me for the age, and I can type it. Notice it's only displaying a numeric keyboard because we added this edttext as a numeric edttext. So I'm gonna type my age, and then I can click on that button, and that will transfer me to the second activity. Now we'll see that we will have a problem when we go to the second activity. Notice that the name that we passed will be displayed as null and the age will be displayed as null. Why is this happening? We did not mention that before, but now is a good time to mention it. Is actually when we go to main activity in here, the getText method is not actually returning a string. It's returning an object. So when we use this in a context that is a string context, the toString method will be called automatically, and that's why we are getting that string. Now in here, when we are passing this value is a string, but this value could be of any type. And since we did not specify this as a string, it will not be dealing with it as a string, it will be dealing with it as an object. And that's why we got the null in there. So to ensure that we are getting a string, we will need to use the toString method to convert that object to a string. So we'll be calling the toString method for this one and this one. And that will ensure that this return type, although it's not a string, will be converted to a string. So again, the getText method is not going to return a string. So if we try to, let's go here and say name.getText. So you'll see the return type of the getText is actually an object of the class editable. So that's not a string. We need to use the toString method to return back the string that we want. So again, before we were getting this as a string because we were using it in the context where a string will be used. So whether we are using it in a text view where we are displaying a text, or whether we are printing it to the console or to the log. However, in here, we are not necessarily passing always a string. This could be of any data type. And since we did not specify that this is a string using the toString method, it dealt with it as an object, and that's why we got a null in our emulator in here. So let's see if we use the toString method now with after the getText and see if that fixes the problem that we have. So I'm going to launch the activity again. I'm going to type my name, and then I'm going to go to the age, type the age. And then when we click on the button, notice that we have welcome Shukri, age 58.